I think purpose, lack of purpose. We are going through the biggest lack of purpose, I'd say, ever in history of the world. And the reason for that, I think, is the dopamine and just the access to information, the access to dopamine with social media, doom scrolling, just this whole mindset shift that's happened over the past few decades. So, and the other kind of part of this is, younger people aren't getting married, younger people aren't having kids. And I'm not saying you have to have kids and you have to get married to have purpose. I'm not saying that, but it for sure helps. I definitely getting up in the morning to take care of somebody else. That's inherently a purpose to get you up in the morning because you have to work your butt off to do something.
All right, welcome everybody back to the Sean Trey Show. I am all over the place today, but there's a reason why that I'm making this mistake, and I'm going to keep that in the video. But I've got a really interesting guest with me that's got a very diverse background. Talk to me about who you are and a little bit about what you do, man.
Yeah, Sean, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I know we're a little far away from each other with you over in Vietnam and me here in Kentucky. I guess my story starts back in where I grew up, a small town, southeast Ohio called Martins Ferry, Ohio. I grew up in an area where everything was very blue collar, coal mines, steel mills. Everyone works their butt off for their money. But what I started realizing was everyone's working their butt off, but not many people really can go out to eat very often. They can't go on that
Yeah.
vacation because they don't have much money. So it sparked something in me that the blue collar grit and combining that with trying to figure out how does the world work? What does the study of money mean? What really is the study of money? And what I've realized over the years, the study of money is really the study of people. But that sparked some, entrepreneurial drive in me. So I started like selling things on eBay, trying to start stacking away some cash. And I got to college, I started day trading the stock markets. That's where I kind of woke up. Wow, there's a whole entire industry out there being able to try to get ahead and try to maybe make some extra cash while I'm, I wasn't paying attention in class. I was just, trading stocks. But I played college baseball. I was always a nerd, and I was on the student body president, or I was student body president of the university. And one of the guys was a board trustee. He said, "Luke, if you ever need an internship, let me know. I'd be glad to help you out." I ended up getting an internship at CNBC in New York City, up in Wall Street. I always kind of went into college that wasn't necessarily what you learned; it was who you met, and that kind of
Yeah.
sparked my whole entire path. That CNBC internship sparked the whole path I'm on now. I met my mentor there. I joined him for 6 years in Cleveland, and then about a year ago, I started my own firm, Lloyd Financial Group. So career wise, that's what I did. But really, it's about the study of money and people, and obviously, I get to build a business and help people out while doing that study of people.
I love that. And I like try to bring in before we started, you kind of asked a little bit about me, and I've got a weird background. I'd say weird, it's just non-traditional. But when I was in university, I had a great professor, and his name was Andrew Wheat, and he started teaching us about all things that were different and interesting. And he taught comparative religion, he taught literature, he had made me read amazing books from every corner of the world. And one of the cool books that I read was the Tao Te Ching, which is like the classic of Taoism. And there was one great, there's so many of those little like poems that are amazing, but there's one great one that talks about a ladder. And it says, whether you go up a ladder or down a ladder, your position is still unstable. And it made me sit there and think about like we in life, and like what you were talking about with money is actually a study of people. And whether you're up a ladder, and I was like talking the other day, and I use this analogy for lifestyle creep. It's like you're at the high on the ladder and you're spending more. But it also like backs up like with my question of studying people and asking the question is like, what do you think most people misunderstand about what makes a meaningful life?
I think purpose, lack of purpose. We are going through the biggest lack of purpose, I'd say, ever in history of the world. And the reason for that, I think, is the dopamine and just the access to information, the access to dopamine with social media, doom scrolling, just this whole mindset shift that's happened over the past few decades. So, and the other kind of part of this is, younger people aren't getting married, younger people aren't having kids. And I'm not saying you have to have kids and you have to get married to have purpose. I'm not saying that, but it for sure helps. Definitely getting up in the morning to take care of somebody else. That's inherently a purpose to get you up in the morning because you have to work your butt off to do something. So my point is there's been this shift. And again, I don't think this really has happened too much in history. I mean, the Roman Empire, I study world history a lot. It's not just American history. It's one of the mistakes I think people make in my industry of managing people's money is they only study American history. They don't study cycles that happened Roman Empire, Dutch Empire, British Empire. Once you get past 250 years of a nation, usually you have inflationary pressure, the currency collapses, the rich get richer, the middle class separates essentially, and then the whole entire kind of system collapses, and the country that was number one just becomes not number one anymore. So I think we're going through some of that stuff in America. But my point is the Roman stuff. I think there was definitely evidence of similar kind of mindsets of what's happening in America, the lack of purpose, and kind of abundance mindset of too much excess and froth in the system in the Roman Empire. But they didn't have the technology, they didn't have your smartphones, they didn't, constantly have, you being connected around the world to everyone you ever knew, shooting text, 20 texts a day to 20 different people. Like my point is, I think everyone's not focused on the present. They're not focused on, the time is going by so quickly for everyone. And, I don't necessarily have any evidence of this, but if I had to guess, I feel like people's time is flying by quicker now than it did 50 or 60 years ago or 100 years ago. I think life felt like it was longer years ago, but because we're so involved, it's going quicker. I think that's making people make some interesting decisions with their money, with their lifestyle, with their finances, going out there, racking up credit card debt, doom spending, whatever you want to call it. I think if you think that time is flying by, you're never going to get ahead, and you're constantly feeling like life's against you and the lack of purpose of not trying to plan for the future, it definitely makes you decisions. And all that does usually is, we're studying corporations and earnings. That's why corporations are making so much money right now. Everyone's spending money. It doesn't matter where it's coming from, but they're not saving it, they're spending it, right?
Right? It's so true, man. And I think people are just going and going and going, and they don't have their compasses are all off, you know? Um, and one of the things that I've been noticing is that as we get people that are again so into the devices and the doom scrolling, like it's really hard to figure out what's important. It's hard to think about what is the thing that you need to be doing right now. And that's like one of the things that's most interesting to me is that as a father, um, I try to figure out the one thing every day that's going to make me a better dad. What's the one thing every day that's going to help, get my business ahead? What's the one thing that's going to get me moving toward fitness? Today, I went to Muay Thai class, I worked out and did some cardio. And my daughter, we train Muay Thai together 3 days a week, and it's hard. I didn't feel like doing it today, but we did it anyway. And that was the one thing that I needed to do to get my cardio, 2 steps ahead. And I think that if you can figure out what are those things that you need to be doing, you'll start moving in the right direction. But it doesn't mean that it's easy. And it doesn't mean that it's easy to understand and know what that is because we have so much noise around us, Hey, you should do this, try this. And I've noticed that like one of the biggest dangers is that people, because they listen to all that noise, they constantly chase more this, more that. And they often struggle to enjoy what they already have.
I didn't create Lloyd Financial Group because I wanted to make more money. I created it because of freedom, purpose, and legacy. What else would I do is kind of what I kind of went through in my head. You know, when you're working for somebody in a lot of ways, you're really trading your time. You're almost the American way is capitalism is essentially slavery, but controlled slavery. Like you're literally building an empire for somebody else. They're paying you in all that kind of way, but my point is, it's not your empire you're building. So for me, it was not about the money side of things. It was the purpose. It was the legacy. It was feeling like I'm getting up in the morning and everything I do, whether it's good or bad, I get to live and die by. I think that's a pretty powerful, thing. And I call it my midlife crisis at 27. I'm 29 years old now. At 27, I um, got married, started thinking about having kids. Really made the decision that I was going to start the business, and it's going to be a grind. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where I'm going to get grayer by the day. I fully expect health. I mean, need to make sure I go to the gym, like you said, in the morning and stay on top of stuff because it's going to be very easy to fall in the trap of on the road eating bad and gaining weight and all that kind of side of things. So I got to stay healthy in that way. But my point is I kind of purposely put myself in a tougher situation. And I think there's some sort of drive, innate nature that came out in me that I did not feel for years. So back in high school, college, I was hungry. I grind. I was a grinder. I really wanted just to continue to push forward. And then I felt myself falling into what I call like comfortability or being content, which I think a lot of people fall into. It's natural and it's easy to fall into because you start making a little bit of money, you have a guaranteed salary coming in. You might have a family you need to support, so it's a big risk to take the risk to maybe start your own thing. But my point is I feel different than I've felt in a very long time in a good way. I feel like that the world is currently my oyster, and with all the stress and anxiety and headaches that's going to come up over the next decade or two of me building this, it's all going to be worth it because I can look back and say, you know what, I did this, I built this, but at the same time, I signed myself up for this because it's very rewarding. I think a lot of people need more rewarding things in their life. It doesn't have to be business, doesn't have to be career, but you have to have a reason to get up in the morning. If not, what are you doing? Just living almost this dream unpurposeful life that you aren't going to look. I always look back in my kind of thinking, when you're 80 years old, what would you want to say about yourself? Or what kind of regrets don't you want to have when you're 80 years old? Oh, I should have started that business. Oh, I should have had kids. A lot of people my age, I've talked to them, they're like, I don't want kids. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But when you're 80 years old, like when you look back on your life, don't you think you might want like a kid around or two kids to be able to have a family around you, people you love, because you're only going to be the last one maybe at that point living at that point if you don't have kids. Like, don't you want family around? And it kind of gets them thinking a little bit like, I never really thought about that when I'm 70 or 80 years old. So maybe I'm different. Maybe I don't know, maybe I'm just an old soul, but I try to think so far in the head and try to put myself like I'm already there and look back on my life to make the important decisions about life.
I love that, man. And it's one of the things too that's really important to me is that I think that people have to figure out what's important to them. They have to figure out their why. They have to figure out what is really the thing that's driving them forward, whether that be family, whether it be your mission, whether it be educating people, whether it be 100 different things. It might be I know one lady who her thing is making the best noodle soup on the planet. That is her whole thing. And she every morning makes the absolute best noodle soup. And it makes she makes people happy and she makes people just so like blessed feeling because she makes great noodle soup. And, that's it. But you have to figure out what it is for you. You have to figure out what is the thing that you're doing that matters the most, you know? And I think that's a journey that people can be afraid of undertaking, afraid of doing, afraid of going down that path because it means that you have to be vulnerable. It means that you have to uh, take a chance to figure things out and take a chance to be wrong. Because maybe you go down a path that doesn't, you know, pan out. You try to open a business and it doesn't go the way you want. But you know what? Maybe you learn about yourself and some in the process, and that learning about yourself is what you're getting to. I remember this one story about this guy who was in a nursing home and he met the love of his life at like 90. And they said, "Are you sad that you met her when you were 90?" And he's like, No, it took me 90 years to be ready to for this relationship. And I mean, that to me was the most powerful thing ever because if you feel like you're continuously evolving and continuously moving toward this beautiful goal, you're doing it right, man.
I'm doing it right. Well, Pete, okay, so I have three things. I'm going to try to make sure I hit on all three things here because as you were talking, all amazing points and sparked three different ideas. The first one being that when it comes to the way of thinking for me, Napoleon Hill is something I live and die by. Napoleon Hill was like a business philosopher in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and Think and Grow Rich, a very popular book. But essentially, if you think and truly believe something, it's going to come true. You have to think about what you want. You have to truly believe you can do it, and it's going to happen. But the problem is most people never think about what they want. They never think that far ahead. This is actually the end goal. And then on top of that, even if they think about it, most people aren't insane enough, like some of us out here, that actually believe they can do it. And every time I've imagined and truly believed there was no lose. There was no way of not achieving that and just truly waking up every single day thinking about it. It's happened. And my best example of that was when I interned at CNBC in New York City. I saw everyone coming on set to TV. And I said, one day I want to be that Wall Street analyst going on TV. So I don't know if it was and every day I woke up thinking about it. I'm like, I want to be on TV as a Wall Street guy. And I don't know if it was the pathway that was created because of me thinking about it, but that's again where my ex boss moved up to Cleveland. 4 months into working for him, he gave me my first opportunity on nightly business report on PBS. COVID happened, and then once COVID happened, a lot of the shows went virtual, and I was able to kind of start stacking some of the shows, minor league appearances, and I started getting on Fox Business. My point is, I thought about it almost every single day, and it ended up working out. Now, I thought, going on TV maybe mattered more than it does in some ways. I don't want to get maybe too much into that, but I thought, once I started on TV, I'm like, it's going to be great for business. It's going to be great notoriety, credibility. It takes a lot of time, repetitions, and years to build that brand. So I maybe had this misconception of what would come maybe quickly from that, which nothing comes quickly. I've learned in life. That was my one point. And then there was a second point, and this is where I'm going to lose my train of thought because again, I had three, and that was one of them. The second one being that happiness. There's something around the happiness kind of realm, but I'll think about that as you go next because I had two other big points I wanted to make there.
I love that, man. And I understand the train of thought thing. My brain's all over the place. But one of the things that I think about is that we have become much more connected through social media, but yet you see people so much more lonely and disconnected from purpose. And one of the things that I think is so important is like a purpose, a life with purpose. And where are you going? What are you doing? Like, are you waking up every morning with the drive and fire to do something? And if you're not, you got to think about what you're doing because you're otherwise. Are you living or are you just existing? You know,
And
and
I think a
so
lot of
many people,
people kind of just
yeah,
exist.
so many people are just existing, but life is too beautiful for that. Last year, man, I'm scared of travel. I hate flying. I had this bad experience when I was younger, but my wife is the person who pushes me out of my comfort zone. And last year, she was like, we're traveling for work. She's a singer. She had shows all around the world, and I flew with her places. I got to see the sun setting over Mount Fuji. I got to see the sunrise in Qatar over the Arabian Sea. I got to fly over the volcanoes of Iceland and look down and see like lava flows. I got to do all these things, try food around the world, meet people from around the world, all because I was willing to step into life and embrace life and see all that life had for me instead of living in that box. Because and maybe you're happy, and that's okay. And like, but I do think that you got to figure out what it is that's your thing. What's your calling? What do
Well, I
you
think
have
one of
to
the
offer the
Buddhist noble
world?
truths is life is suffering. And I think
Yeah.
accepting that life is suffering almost inherently makes you happy. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is life's going to be a struggle. Like, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of bad things happen probably in your life because it's life. And you're going to see loved ones pass away eventually because no one's going to live forever. So people you love and spend time with, you won't have one day. The one day you're not going to be here. So one of the Buddhist noble truths is life is suffering in a lot of ways. And I have these conversations a lot. I'm not going to bring up the specific name recently, but recently the past few weeks I was talking to someone in my family basically, and he's just like said that he's so stressed out and anxious, almost can't function anymore because of just what's going on. And, maybe it's, too much dopamine, whatever it be. But I'm like, dude, like, chill out, man. Like, yeah, you might not feel good and might be anxious and stressed, but just accept it. Like, just kind of man up. I hate to say that, like, man up and just be like,
Yeah.
look, yeah, listen, you're not going to feel good every day. Yeah, life's not going to be easy every day. Like, just go into it knowing that and expecting that it's going to be better. And that kind of it did spark one other thought. The thought that came back that I wanted to talk about earlier. Being uncomfortable is okay, and actually, it does allow you to
Yeah.
grow. It's not. I don't even like saying failing. I like saying put yourself in uncomfortable situations, things you never thought you could do or things that give you anxiety or stress, whatever it be. And anxiety, by the way, is a natural. I hate this whole anxiety thing, like in this world. Like I'm anxious every single day of my life trying to build a business and trying to do 10 different hats in my, world. But anxiety was inherently a biological trait ingrained in us for
Yeah.
survival. It's not a bad
Right.
thing. Anxiety is natural to the human nature. So the fact we're trying to diagnose anxiety. Like we all have anxiety. Maybe some of us more than others, but in my opinion, deal with it a little bit. But putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, I think, allows you to grow and it allows your perception to change. And my point with the business side is I don't think I would have started my business if I had made every right decision in life and I was comfortable at all times. I don't think I would have had the capacity, or if you want to call it balls, to start the business. Because if you lose every once in a while, or if you take a big risk and it doesn't pay off, you almost get okay and acceptable with that risk tolerance. You're like,
Yeah.
what's the worst that could happen? I've already been slapped in the face once and got knocked down and broke my neck, but now I cracked it back over, and now I'm gonna get back up, stand back up, and try to fight the fight again. Like it allows you to perceive things differently, and you become comfortable with your nervous system or your brain with that level of risk again. So, I think failing is a good thing. Obviously, you don't want to fail all the time, but Napoleon Hill again talks about procrastination being the number one hindrance to wealth and number one hindrance to almost life.
Yeah.
Paralysis by analysis. And I was always a nerd. Again, I wasn't kidding. I was pushed to be valedictorian in high school, so I became valedictorian in high school. I triple majored in college. But what I found was the schooling, yeah, sure, it mattered a little bit, but the schooling really never really added I don't think long term value in my life from a career standpoint in a lot of ways. It was definitely the meeting people, but it's almost I hate to say it, becoming dumber throughout the years is almost beneficial
Yeah.
because paralysis by analysis, if you're smart, you don't take the risk because you're always constantly analyzing every scenario. What if this fails? What if this happens? All the hypotheticals. Well, it's
Yeah.
proven the people that, if you fail 99 times out of 100, but that one time works, it's proven the people that make decisions and are decisive, they always come out ahead. So I've almost programmed myself, not necessarily in, all aspects of my life, but from a almost business mindset to become dumber and not overthink everything and be
Mm.
quick with my decision making. And if it fails, I reroute. But I'm quick to make that decision. I don't try to contemplate too much over every single thing I do.
I love that because at the end of the day, like you just have to put one foot in front of the other. I now with my podcast, let's see. I have 4 podcasts by the way cuz I'm a bit out there. I have the Sean Trey show which I talk about like life and how to be more resilient. Growing Money, which I talk about personal finance because I knew nothing about money and I wanted to learn. So I said, what better way than to talk to like financial experts and learn? And then I have a podcast on um, content creation because I have a content creation company. I like do content marketing. And then finally, I've got a wine podcast because I grew up in the Napa Valley and I love wine. I love winemakers. So I talk to all these winemakers about what they do. My smallest podcast, I have over 50 episodes. My largest podcast, it's 400 something, you know? And at the end of the day, it comes about by showing up every single day. I post 2 episodes a week per podcast. I have 3 reels per episode. I had 2 long form episodes per podcast, 3 reels per episode. Then I'm doing short form and I'm doing long form. I do it by showing up every single day and hammering. It's that's it. You show up and then today's done and then you do the next one. One of the things that I've learned from creating content with my wife when we do a music video, we release it. I put months. Sometimes a song will take a year or plus to evolve and come out, and like become and release and everything awesome. And what we realized is like when we're done with it, my workers will be like, "Hey, how many views do we have?" And I'm like, "I'm not paying attention anymore." Like, why not? I'm like, because I'm already looking at the next thing. That's done. It's up. We just got to show up tomorrow.
Well, that's my mindset. Too many people try something out and never stick with it long enough. So they'll
Right?
try something out for a month and then give up because they're like, I didn't see the instant reward. Well, there's no get rich quick scheme out there. All right. You're going to lose
No.
all your money, or you're going to put yourself even in a worse situation if you're trying to. It's not even have to be about money. It could be about clout or success, or nothing
Yeah.
comes quickly. A lot of this stuff,
No.
the way I view things is almost on a yearly basis. I'll try almost anything out in my business. If I make a decision, I'm allocating capital to new marketing, maybe project, maybe it's a new software, maybe it's a new partnership or employee, whatever it be. It's going to have to be at least a year. There's a
Yep.
1 year time frame of, then we can track how is this done month to month, 3 months, 6 months. But everything for me in my life, for the most part, has been about a year to see any kind of decent return, whether it was from media, whether it was from investments, definitely longer term for horizons tend to work out better in the investment world. But my newsletter is a great example of that. When I started Lloyd Financial, it's been actually, it's funny today. Today, I think is my 1 year anniversary launching Lloyd Financial Group.
Congratulations,
I
man.
Thank you. But the first day of launching, it took me 3 months of government hell, by the way, to get open. We don't live in America as much of a capitalistic system as we think we do. It's very controlled by regulators and the government. But
Yeah.
when I got open, I launched my newsletter. It had 0 subscribers. And over the past year, it's grown to 3,200 subscribers.
That's
And it
awesome.
took us about probably 9 months, probably until about 3, 4 months ago, that we really were just kind of flat in the hundreds. And then all of a sudden, some big events took it off. We started gaining thousands of followers pretty quickly on that. But it took 9 months of waking up every single day with 150 to 200 people basically reading our newsletter. Uh, so my point is that things come quickly when they do happen. It becomes very exponential, but you got to put in the time. You got to wake up and realize that you're probably putting in work that you won't see the return for at least a few years down the road for.
I I I help people make content. We make a ton of videos. And the people I work with make a ton of videos. And one of the things I tell them is they're like, I'm going to start getting sales right away. And I said, no, no, you're not. But you are going to be getting a ton of sales in a year and you're going to be crushing it in 2. And they're like, what? Well, that's a long time. And I said, everything takes time. And if you can get out there and you can stay consistent and you can keep showing up, I it's wild that with my different podcasts, I'm talking to people that if I had have tried to message those people 2 or 3 years ago, nothing. They wouldn't message back. They would, and now I had someone that is a huge person I hugely respect that messaged me and said, Sean, I love what you're doing. And I was just like, oh, damn, that's wild, man. I didn't even know that I'm in the same like arena as this person, knowing who I am. But they did. And that was just mind blowing for me that it was just about hustle. And it was about showing up and about staying consistent. And it was interesting too. I'm a basketball fan, and I grew up in Boston. I was born in
Yeah,
the
my
Boston
Cavs did
area.
not look very good a few days ago.
Dude, yeah, man, right? And we were supposed to do good this year in the Celtics, and it didn't happen, turn out so well in the playoffs. But I loved Larry Bird, and my dad took me to the Garden, the old Boston Garden, when I was a kid, and we watched Larry Bird. And Larry Bird has this one quote that I love. I've got a theory that if you give 100% all of the time, somehow things will work out in the end. And I've always loved that. I've always loved that because you can't control much. That whole stoicism, control what you can, let go of the rest. But like the one thing you can control is how much you show up. That's in your power,
In your attitude and your behaviors.
right?
It's that I took sales. I think my sales training. I took sales training for 2.5 years at my previous firm. I think that was sometimes more impactful than my college education in some ways, because everything's sales. You're either selling a product or
Yep.
service or yourself. Even if you're an
Yep.
engineer at a company and you're working on planes and engines, you're technically still
Yep.
working in sales because you're adding value. You have to add value. That's how capitalism works, right?
Yeah.
So, but in the sales training, it basically talks about this triangle, and two of the parts of the triangle were behaviors and attitude. And if you have the right behaviors and the right attitude, inherently things are going to work out. Most people don't block their calendars. Most people
Yeah.
do things when they're told to do things. They don't go out there and hunt themselves, or create their own calendar, knowing what they need to do, to have that 1 week, 1 month, 1 year growth, whatever kind of life they're trying to live. And, one of the things for me, talking about not just the behaviors and attitude, but the money side of the equation, most financial advisors talk about saving more money. It's also about increasing your income. Everyone tends to
Right.
forget about that. They tend to
Right.
say, to think, they tend to like say or think for some reason that it's almost impossible to increase your income quickly. Well, right now, profit margins in corporations are the highest they've ever been in history in a lot of ways. AI, technology, productivity is going to boost like crazy over the next 10 years. If you learn how to use AI, you're going to increase your productivity. All it is quantifying the value you bring to the capitalistic system. What problems do you solve? The bigger problems you solve, usually in life, the more you get paid. So all my clients, we go through almost this conversation, philosophical conversation. How much value, revenue, savings, profitability, you can quantify any metric you want, whether you work in HR, engineering, or directly in sales. Obviously, sales is a little bit easier to quantify, but how much value do you bring to that firm? If it's $1 million of value, and you're paid $150,000 or $100,000, and it's only costing them $200,000 or $300,000 for the revenue, they're making $500,000 off of you. So maybe you do deserve a $50,000 raise or a $100,000 raise. Like, these are conversations you should think about and talk with your employer about. Every year for me, I quantified the exact dollars of
Yep.
revenue I thought I delivered to the firm. And one of the reasons I made this pivot, well, again, wasn't about money, but money's a scorecard. I think it's a way to track score sometimes because there's not really other many ways to track score, day to day. But when it comes to the money side, I'm like, I'm making my firm, you know, $300,000, $400,000 more than I'm being paid. And I felt like from that point, that was where they're going to make a lot more money than I'm going to start, keep up with them. If I'm making $2 million for the firm, I'm going to be making $1 million a year now. Probably making 300 or 400. Like, my point is, it was still going to be good money, but I was going to definitely be adding a lot more value to them than they were adding to me. So you have to think differently. Think like an entrepreneur, even if you're not an entrepreneur or a business owner. Think like a business owner. Think of your
Yes.
family like a business. Think of your life like a business.
Yes. I love that. I love it. 100%, man. At this point in your life, what do you personally believe gives life meaning?
Good question. And that's a deep question. The broad answer, like, it goes back to the purpose answer. But if I had to answer it for myself, um, for me, my family gives life meaning.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to me, without people you love, we're truly on this floating rock. And again, this is maybe the pessimistic side of me. Like, it's funny. I was on a Fox Business yesterday in New York, and Charles Payne goes, "Luke, you're an optimist." Hi. I'm like, okay. Like, maybe I came across in that moment like an optimist, but I'm usually a pessimist at heart. Life, again, I go back to the Buddhist noble truth. I think a lot of ways life is suffering. Life, in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, it's hard to find purpose. It's hard to find that meaning. It's hard to find why we're here. We're on this floating rock, stuck alone here. We create our own fun and things that we fill our time up, because that's really all we work is. The work's not bad, by the way. Everyone wants to retire. Work provides you something to do with your time. If you enjoy what you do, you never work a day. It's because it fills your time up.
Yeah.
You go out for your hobbies, you're filling your time up. We're just trying to find excuses to fill our time up in society, right? So for me,
Right.
it's like without without my loved ones, or without friends or people I love around, there'd be really no reason for me to be here. I just would be kind of existing, as you kind of said earlier. So to me,
Yeah.
meaning of life is people I love and love to be around. And obviously throughout the years, I'm 29, I've already lost people I love, and that's going to continue to happen probably over the next 10 years, and it'll happen more and more. And then next thing you know, I'll be 80, hopefully 80 years old. If I make it past 60, I'll be happy. But and then we'll be the ones to go eventually too. And then hopefully our kids or other people we impact in life that love us provides them meaning and purpose in life. But it comes down to love. And yeah, you can go spiritual and talk about religion. I think religion's a lot of fun to talk about, and I am a practicing Catholic, so I do really get into that. But at the same time, I always like using the human being purpose and love than, always trying to say life is meaningful because, we're going to live in this fairy tale life after. I have no idea. I think I know, but I don't know for sure. So I'd like to kind of think about how it is actually here on Earth.
Yeah. Where can people go to find out more about you and what you do?
Great question. So first of all, I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks for having me on today. My website is www.lloydfg.com. That's two L's OYDFG.com. I have my newsletter popped up right there when you log in. So I do a newsletter Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. every 5 days a week, talking about the investment world, also tax planning, financial planning, philosophical things like purpose and quantifying your value. These are all things I talk about in the newsletter. And then every social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Luke Lloyd. You can find me there. And I'm just looking forward to continuing to grow with other people. And we're all in this together. So we're all it's funny how I hate the term expert. Everyone will say, Luke, you're, a financial expert. No, I'm a student. I study things. I'm a student of the market, student of life, and we're all students. I hate the term experts. That's one thing. Yeah, I brought my buddy out to New York City with me doing a media tour in New York, and um, he's kind of like, Luke, what do you think about being around like all these billionaires or very successful people? I'm like, I don't care. There's nothing that separates them and me. How successful you are, how much money you have. There's nothing that separates any of us besides maybe the actual materialistic things. I
Right.
don't get intimidated by people I used to growing up. I'm like, well, I'll put these people on pedestals, celebrities on pedestals. We're all in this together. We're all playing the same game. And most people I've met in really high spots, there's no such thing as luck. You create your own luck. It's discipline and consistency. But they're no smarter than me and you, and they're no
Yep.
not much different than me and you is what I'm saying.